Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host today. I'm also the creator and the moderator of thechocolatelife.com. So I'd like to welcome all of you here today. I think I already said that. And to remind you of two things. Number one is this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, as are all of the episodes of Pod Save Chocolate, are sponsored by members of thechocolatelife.com. So you can go over there right now, join the Chocolate Life. We'll send you a monthly newsletter. You can get access to content that non-members are not able to access, and you'll support the mission of Pod Save Chocolate and thechocolatelife.com. While you're watching, also do a like of the video, perhaps throw a comment onto the video, especially on YouTube, and if you can, subscribe to the Pod Save Chocolate channel on YouTube to help grow what it is that we're doing here. And then finally, if you can go into either the live chat on YouTube or on LinkedIn or Facebook, go into the comments, just let us know where in the world you're connecting from. So I'll get that shout out up on screen. And of course, during the course of the hour, I will be answering your questions and responding to comments that you might have about any part of the topic of today's episode. And with that, I want to jump in to what it is that we're going to be talking about today. And, it occurs to me there's something I need to do to ask the people who produce the software to make a real quick change. But it occurred to me over the course of doing this. So this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there. I'm signed in. You can you've got the account button here. If you're not signed in, you can go click on it. It will say join, and you can become a member of the Chocolate Life. There's always a free membership. And for every single one of these episodes, I do produce, let's go this way, I do produce a post. And so from an archive perspective, you'll always be able to find the link on YouTube as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. And there's always an episode overview where I go and I represent what it is that I'm going to talk about during the course of the hour. And there are links, that you can click on, so you don't have to follow along too closely and get the URLs from the live stream. You can go back to this post on the Chocolate Life afterwards and find them. So that's I think really, really cool for that. And if there are any new links that get mentioned during the course of the live stream, I'll add them into here afterwards. So again, you don't have to pay close attention to the URLs or try to grab them off the screen during the course of doing this. So what I want to talk about today is to talk about the nature of disruption. What might be things that are going on in the world of cocoa and chocolate that I think are going to be disruptive, things that could be disruptive, but maybe not quite the way people think they are going to be disruptive, and then things that I don't think are going to be disruptive at all, but are nonetheless in the news, and they're things that we're going to be discussing in future episodes. And that's part of what it is that I want to do here, is that this notion of how things might change the status quo ante of the way the world of cocoa and chocolate is currently organized is something that I want to talk about in future episodes. And I'm setting the stage here very early on in this new series of Pod Save Chocolate. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is the European Union deforestation regulations, something that's called the EUDR. And right now, there's just this banner here, and the reason why it's red or reddish is because I think it's going to be disruptive. But the EUDR, and I want to let everybody know that the episode of the Chocolate Life, the Chocolate Life, Pod Save Chocolate. I said it for 2 years. It's going to be difficult to not do that for a while. So the episode of Pod Save Chocolate for December 19th is going to be featuring an interview with Anthony Fountain. Anthony is one of the co-founders of a group called the Voice Network, and he was a panelist at the recent, by video, at the recent International Cocoa Diplomacy, International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum in London, where I was. Had some really, really interesting things to say about the EUDR and what the EUDR is, the impact that the EUDR is going to have going forward. So we'll go into a real deep dive about the EUDR going forward. Now, it's really important to know that anybody who's doing any business in cocoa and chocolate in the EU is going to be required to prove compliance with the sourcing directives of the EUDR, which means that you're going to be able to provide documentary evidence that the cocoa beans that are being used for the chocolate that you're making do not come from areas that are recognized as being protected, right? And that do not contribute to deforestation. Now, why is this going to be disruptive? And again, this is something that is going to go into a deep dive with Anthony in about a month. But it's important to know that the regulations are going to come into full force in December of 2024. But the ripple impact is being started to be felt even now. But it's really, really important to know about these. And that's because, let's say that I'm buying cocoa from Ghana, right? And there are something like 800,000 smallholder farms in Ghana. Right. So in order to be able to be in compliance with the EUDR, I need to know that the farm that I'm buying, or the cooperative, which is rolling up a whole bunch of farms, I need to be able to verify where those farms are. So they're the boundaries. They need to be mapped where the boundaries are, and we need to be able to make sure that those boundaries do not exist within areas which are protected. Right. 800,000 farms. Now, number one is, that's going to be expensive. And it turns out that COCOBOD, because of its control over the Ghanaian cocoa landscape, has been able to geofence all 800,000 cocoa farms in the country. And so it is going to be able to provide the data to cocoa traders, chocolate makers, with the information that they need to prove that the sources of their cocoa beans are in compliance with the EUDR. Now, that's great, right? But it turns out that there's no real way around this. So, for example, the cocoa beans might go from Ghana, for example, let's say, to a processor in Malaysia, who's going to take the beans and convert them into derivative products. So they're taking the beans, converting them into butter, powder, and nibs and liquor. If any of those derivatives are then going to go to the EU, right, then they are subject to the EUDR. And so, even if you're a processor in another part of the world, you're going to be able to prove you're going to be able to need to prove that you're in compliance with EUDR. And this becomes an interesting challenge. So, for example, if I'm participating in the process of mass balance, which is I will have some beans that might be fair trade certified and some beans that are not fair trade certified, and they just get mixed. So at the port of export, I'm blending beans, I'm mixing beans from lots of different places into a big tote for one reason or another. I might have hundreds or potentially thousands, right, if I've got multiple containers in a shipment, of individual farms for which those cocoa beans need to be traced. And so you can see that very, very quickly, this is going to be a mess, right? And it's not entirely sure how this is going to be enforced, what the regulations are going to be, what the mechanisms are going to be. But if you're a small chocolate maker and you're buying some cocoa from Ghana, or Cote d'Ivoire, anywhere in the world, not just West Africa, you're going to need to be able to prove these things. And you plan to sell that chocolate into the EU, you're going to need to be in compliance with the regulations. And right now, Cote d'Ivoire has something like 500,000 cocoa farms, and they've done none of this mapping or at least not to the extent. There is no central database of all these geofence boundaries. And I don't know of any country who has come close. So will it take more than a year? Probably, to get this work done. So the EUDR could be incredibly disruptive in the sense that it's going to be really, really messy until everybody figures out what their roles are going to be in this process and exactly what they need to provide in order to be able to be in compliance. Right? And this is the case where you might sell chocolate to a distributor, and a distributor is selling it overseas. You still need to be in compliance, right? So, as the maker of the chocolate, the person who is actually doing the processing, who's selling the product into the EU, you're probably going to be responsible. I'm going to have a chance to also interview Robin Dand, who wrote the book, The International Cocoa Trade. He's also currently the Secretary General of the Federation of Cocoa Commerce. I'm writing an article about the EUDR for International Confectionery Magazine for the January issue. And all of this is, coming to head right now. But if you're buying beans from anywhere in the world and you plan to be selling that chocolate into the EU, right, then you are going to need to prove to be in compliance with the EUDR, right? And as a small chocolate maker, you're going to be relying on lots of other people to provide you with the data you need. And the question is, do you know what data you need in order to be able to be in compliance? And so this is going to be a real huge and real disruptive issue. Now, what I've done here is the link below this is just to a search at DuckDuckGo around the notion of what the EUDR is and what some of the regulations are going to be. I haven't vetted this list, right? It's just to give you an idea of here are a bunch of resources that you might start looking at to educate yourself about what the potential impact of the EUDR is going to be, so that when you come into the episode of Pod Save Chocolate on December 19th with Mr. Fountain, I'm hoping what you'll be able to do is ask some questions. I mean, certainly that's something I'm going to do over the course of the next month. I'm going to be looking at a lot of this content and say, okay, what do I need to know in order to be able to work with my clients who may be interested in topics around the EDR for their businesses. It's going to be incredibly disruptive in the sense that, as I say, in the sense that it's going to be messy. It's not disruptive in the sense of, in the old .com world, we talk about intermediation, and where we would be, completely change the relationship between consumers and the technology that they're or the products that they're buying. Not disruptive in that way, but disruptive in the sense of causing a whole lot of confusion and people not being very certain about what their responsibilities are and what they need to know in order to be compliant. So this is a topic that we're going to be discussing because when it comes to saving chocolate, reducing the pressure on deforestation, which is a component which contributes to climate change. So deforestation is going to be a huge issue when it comes to the future of cocoa and the future of chocolate. And what we need to do to protect chocolate going forward. And so this is why the EUDR is going to be a topic on Pod Save Chocolate over the course of the coming months, up until this time next year, when the regulation is going to come into effect in full force. So if you have any questions about that, or say wherever you're watching, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, let me know where in the world you're connecting from. I'll get that post up on the screen. If you have comments or questions, also put them into the live chat on YouTube or on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I will get your comments up on screen and read them. And if you have questions, I will go and attempt to answer in this episode, and if not, in future episodes of Pod Save Chocolate. Often there are cases where questions that are brought up in episodes, this is true of the Chocolate Life Live, that somebody will have brought up a question and it becomes the inspiration for a future topic. And so this is one great way where you, as a participant in these live streams, can have an impact on future episodes. So just really, really helpful to me to have that input from you. So I've got two things that I want to talk about. which I think might be disruptive, but not necessarily disruptive in the way people have been thinking about them. And the first one involves a Mr. Beast. Um, so many people may know of or have heard of or subscribed to Mr. Beast on YouTube. He has 200 million followers or something like that, subscribers on YouTube. And many people know that Mr. Beast has a chocolate brand, which is called Feastables. And um, I am sure that there are big companies, right? And so here's a little, you're not going to be able to hear the video because I haven't set this up in order for you to be able to do that. But here's a video, the link obviously to this Instagram post, where he's talking about what it is that he's doing. And he's talking about what it is that Feastables is doing as being disruptive of the chocolate industry. And I'm going to say, no, not quite in the way you're thinking of, right? But this number is interesting, $100 million, right? I'm sure that it's probably in gross sales, not what he's profited. But he's got 100 million in sales. And I don't know if this is for the last year or over the course of the time he's been selling chocolate. But this $100 million figure is how much Tony's Chocolonely did last year, right? A little over 100 million in sales, the cracked the barrier. And it took them 15 years to get there. So it took Tony's 15 years to get there. It took Mr. Beast less than 3, I think, something like that. And this represents selling roughly 50 cents worth of chocolate to each one of his subscribers on YouTube. It's a very, very long tail. Now, he's got 200 million subscribers. Tony's got 125,000 friends, special friends. And so this is where Mr. Beast might be disruptive, not in the overall chocolate industry, but with disrupting the narrative of Tony's Chocolonely. Specifically. Now, there's an aspect in which this is not disruptive at all, because what it is that Mr. Beast is doing is he's avoiding the problem of West Africa. He's not sourcing his cocoa from West Africa. He's sourcing his cocoa from Peru. And one of the things that we've been able to do is taking a look at some of the comments that he's made about the chocolate that he's selling, is that we know that the origin of the cocoa beans is Peru, right? And I also know from conversations that I've been having is that he's using the organic CCN 51, which was the motivation for the creation of the Salón del Cacao y Chocolate in Lima over a decade ago. So USAID had invested an enormous amount of money in the cocoa sector to convert cocoa farmers into being cocoa farmers. They were going to be bringing about 5,000 hectares of new production online in 2012, 2013. But they hadn't thought at all about letting the industry know that there was going to be all this new cocoa coming into the market. They had no idea who was going to buy it. And so USAID with the Prom Peru, which is the export promotion agency, and others within Peru, set up the Salón del Cacao y Chocolate, to let the world know that Peru was, expanding onto the map for being a new cocoa producing country. And it was focusing on organic, and it was focusing on this high productivity CCN 51. So it's a bulk cocoa, not a specialty cocoa. And it turns out that Mr. Beast's Feastable bars are made entirely with this organic CCN 51 from Peru. They're using a manufacturer. The chocolate is manufactured in Peru, right? And so he can claim it's child labor free, right? And these things are slavery free because those are not issues in Peru. But he's not doing anything to solve the problem of illegal labor. And I don't know that any of the profits or proceeds associated with this are going to any efforts in order to be able to solve this problem, right? But this is really interesting in the sense that his subscriber base at 200 million is overwhelmingly much larger than Tony's special friend base is. And he's got 100 million in sales in, I think, under 3 years. Whereas it took Tony's Chocolonely close to 15 to get to roughly the same mark. This is why this is disruptive, not because he's disrupting the chocolate industry. There's not, 100 million sales out of 104 billion. I mean, he's just a very, very small percentage of what's going on. But he's got this very uh, dedicated, for want of a better use, parsing my words here. He's got a very dedicated fan base. These people, and there are 200 million of them, and they're very, very committed to what it is that Mr. Beast is doing. I have been, responding to posts on r/chocolate and Reddit around the Feastables brand. It's really, really good. Apparently, I learned this morning, he did a tasting between Mr. Feastables and Toak chocolate with Gordon Ramsay. I'm gonna have to find the video, and if I find the video, I'll put it into the links for today's post. Um, and even though Toak is a better chocolate according to Gordon Ramsay, the fact that Mr. Beast was able to get a celebrity like Gordon Ramsay to taste his chocolate and compare it with what is, likely one of the most, if not the most expensive chocolate brands in the world, was just sort of an exemplar of the kind of power of marketing that the Mr. Beast brand holds. And I would say it's more powerful than Tony's brand. And so that's why I think that moving forward, what's going to happen is that this whole notion of disruption, as I say, it's not a disruption. Nobody in the world of chocolate, one of the big, 5 chocolate companies or the big cocoa traders is going to look at this and go, this is going to change our business model in any way, right? But I believe that it is going to change the narrative around what Tony's Chocolonely is doing, how they're doing it, and what the future is. And I think it's disruptive in that way. And it's worthwhile paying attention to this going forward for precisely that reason. Let's go here. Um, um, so interesting to know about Mr. Beast. Now, I would be really interested to know if anybody who's watching has tasted any of the Mr. Beast Feastables bars and what you think about the chocolate itself. If I hadn't told you that it was organic CCN 51, would you have said, yeah, this is CCN 51. That's why it is the flavor that it is, the flavor profile that it is. Just really, really quick, if you've tasted it, just in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were about the chocolate itself and about the brand. I got to tell you, I love the mold. I mean, the mold design that they've got in this bar is really, really cool, and people should go take a look at it. If you don't know anything else about the brand, you go take a look at the mold and go, huh, that's a really, really interesting concept. How can I do something like that? Because I think it's really, really cool as well. Just a quick from Mike in Kansas City. It's cold in Kansas City. It was 37 degrees this morning when I woke up here in Prescott. So for those of you who work in centigrade, somewhere between 2 and 3 degrees, somewhere between 2 and 3 degrees, well, closer to 3 degrees centigrade when I got up this morning. So pretty chilly here. Although, Mike, it's not rainy here. It's like a beautifully clear, crisp fall day. I would love to find a way to get Mr. Beast here on Pod Save Chocolate. And believe you me, it's something I am exploring. So if anybody out there actually has a connection to anybody on Mr. Beast's team that I can reach out to, I would really, 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 really appreciate the introduction. I have some other plans, other things that I'd like to do with Mr. Beast on this that I think will be great. Yeah, I want to figure out a way to get him and talk about the chocolate and to talk about all of this. Not necessarily to push back on what he's doing, but to provide this broader framework, contextualization for what it is that he's doing. And also because he's got such a large fan base. He's got this, this subscriber base that if he were to participate in a particular kind of messaging around cocoa and chocolate, that we would have the potential to be able to have an enormous amount of consumer impact, and that's one of the reasons why I would love to talk to him about this. Yeah, so if anybody knows Mr. Beast, how to get in touch with him, let me know. And if you can make an introduction, please do, because I would love to do it. Again, not in an adversarial way, but just um, to have fun with it. And I may be doing I'll be doing a tasting / review. I will go and buy at least one of each of every one of the Feastables bars. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. So yeah, Mike, thanks for that. And also for Jeffrey Gardner, chef from Marsada Chocolate in Torrance, California. Thanks for joining it. Your kids certainly have tasted Mr. Beast Feastable, much to your dismay. So I suppose the question, chef, is do they prefer the chocolate you make? Or I mean, I suppose that's a really unfair question. Are they more loyal to their daddy's brand or to Mr. Beast? So yes, absolutely. So Laurent, thank you very much. That's true. The chocolate is made in Peru. So the beans come from Peru. It's organic CCN 51. I want you to know that the original production of this that was funded by American taxpayer dollars to convert coca farmers into cocoa farmers. This was in the late, twin 2000s, so prior to 2013. So in the years leading up to 2012, 2013, so what, 3 to 5 years to get all of this into production. So yeah, primarily in the San Martin province, but also perhaps in Huánuco and Ucayali, which are in the same part of Peru. But yes, and the chocolate is made in Peru. I do know the name of the company that makes the chocolate, and it's a success story in and of itself. I mean, the fact that there is this factory in Peru that's been able to scale up to handle that scale of production as an export product is just really wonderful thing as well. And one of the things I would like to know is they are doing value-added production. They're not exporting cocoa beans or derivative products from Peru, right? They are doing some added value production. So they're all the way to finished chocolate that they're exporting from Peru. But it would be interesting to really have a much better understanding about how the money which is made from this product. So, what is the step in terms of value add, and how much of the difference between the farm gate price of the cocoa and the finished price of the chocolate bar, how that is distributed. That's one thing I would like to know a lot more about. Industry average is 6%, 6%, something like that for an industrial chocolate. Would be interesting to know exactly where it is. But Laurent, thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it is made in Peru is a very, very interesting testament. And certainly one of the things that I believe Mr. Beast talks about in um, in his um, in his discussion of what it is that he's doing and how he's being disruptive. I, is it, again, I think everything that Mr. Beast is doing is disruptive, more of Tony Chocolonely. Tony is Chocolonely and what they're talking about, and not necessarily disruptive of the chocolate industry in general. Yeah, no. So Laurent, thank you very much again. It is a testament to. I would also be really interested to know, again, if somebody else knows, is um, in thinking about this chocolate bar, who the Mr. Beast team relied on to decide to go and partner with the manufacturer in Peru. I think because I know of two very large manufacturers that might be able to handle this process, one of which is in Tingo Maria, the other one is in the Lima metropolitan area. I think they're using the one in the Lima metropolitan area, not the one in Tingo Maria, where I've visited not only Tingo Maria, the town, but the factory that's there. So again, just this whole thing really, really fascinates me, because when we think about the mission that International Cocoa Diplomacy is looking at doing, one of the things we want to think about is different models of capturing value add in producing countries. And this is an interesting model to think of. And that's another one of the contexts for which I'd like to speak. For the reasons why I'd like to speak to Mr. Beast is this if it is disruptive of the chocolate industry, in general, it is a producing country which is manufacturing a finished product, finished chocolate bars for export. Um, and now that I'm saying that, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that it is finished chocolate bars that are exported from Peru, or is it finished chocolate, which is exported from Peru to someplace else and then deposited and wrapped? I'm actually not sure about that. I need to go figure. I got whole lots of questions that factor into this whole thing. Would really, really love to know more about it. So, if you know anybody in the Mr. Beast team and can make an introduction, I would really, really be happy about that. So, um, so yeah, is it be disruptive? Yes, right, but not in the way that I think that Mr. Beast is saying, or that the industry is reporting around when it comes to what it is that they're doing. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about as being disruptive is alt chocolate. So, alt chocolate is a term I use to cover the entire category of quote unquote chocolate, which doesn't have any cocoa in it. So if it doesn't have cocoa in it, doesn't have cocoa butter, it doesn't have non-fat solids, right? Then it can't legally be called chocolate. But there has been a lot of research over the last couple of years. I've reported on it here on the Chocolate Life Live and on the Chocolate Life, but as well as in articles for International Confectionery about companies that are looking to find ways to produce a chocolate adjacent product which doesn't contain cocoa. So this product avoids the issues which are associated with illegal labor so from illegal labor to deforestation, right? And so can we produce something that has less environmental impact as well as sidesteps the labor issues which ripple throughout all of the cocoa fields of West Africa. So I want to jump in real quickly. Laurent has commented, right? Everything is made in Peru from the beans to the bar. So they're exporting finished wrapped chocolate. So, okay. Yeah. And huge volume. If they're doing 100 million in sales, let's say the retail price is $3 a piece. So that's 30 million, 33 million bars. Yeah, $3. I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out. I mean, I have to figure out exactly what that means in terms of bars. It's a lot. I mean, it's huge volume, making them probably the largest exporter of chocolate out of Peru. Um, and yeah, so Laurent, thanks for confirming that. Great. Um, anyway, jumping back. So there is a company in the UK, goes by the name of Win-Win Food Labs. And what they did in the last month is they released a trio of chocolate bars. And, if I thought about it, I would have made sure that I was sent some last week. And I'm in the middle of finishing up a review of them, and I'll publish that and put the link in here on today's post. But what they've done is they've unveiled a trio of look-alike. That's an interesting way of thinking about it from a magazine like Confectionery Production. Cocoa-free bar, a trio of bar range. Right. And so I've had a chance to interview Johnny Drain, who's one of the co-founders of Win-Win Labs, and talk with him about this. I tasted a product in development about this time last year and had a chance to taste all three bars, which had been released as a part of this line. And what they've done is they've done a bar which is designed to be I call them mock-offs. So not knockoffs because it's not real chocolate. It's a mock-off of this bar from Terry's. It's an orange bar. They have a mock-off of a bar from Cadbury, so a whole hazelnut milk Cadbury Dairy Milk bar, and then a third bar, which is a direct knockoff, at least from a packaging perspective, of a Tony's Chocolonely bar. Very, very interesting. And so I have an opportunity to go and take a look at it. So here's the knockoff of the Cadbury Dairy Milk bar, and here is what the Tony's Chocolate Lonely Bar looks like. And I'm not going to spoil my my review of this. Just say what you might want to do is I wrote an article about 3 years ago in which I took a look at what Tony's did when they did a similar kind of marketing program. So Tony said, we're going to, take a Mickey on, four brands that we believe are competitors of ours. And what they do is they produce bars using molds that were related to it. So if you want to find more about this, it's called their Sweet Solutions campaign. You can go find more about it. And I've got some links on the Chocolate Life that you can go and read. But what I wanted to do was talk a little bit more about, do I think that alt chocolates are going to be disruptive, right? And I've had a lot of time to think about that in the process of writing the review of the bars that I were sent. I have my own sense from the research that I've done over the last year or so about this, but I've been forced to really think about it in the context of the review, and I may make that review a part of the Friday episode. This coming Friday's episode of Pod Safe Chocolate is going to be around Thanksgiving and giving thanks for chocolate. So think about that if you're watching. It's like, what are you thankful for? It also goes into, I think, one of the missions, and it's one of the questions that I'm going to be asking of everyone is, what are you doing to save chocolate? What are you going to commit to doing this week, next month, next year, over the course of the next year to help save chocolate? When I was talking about this last week with Brigitte Racine, she said maybe protect is a better word than save. But we both agreed that the phrase pod save chocolate rolls off the tongue a little better than pod protect chocolate. And for those of you who don't know, there's this fabulous political commentary channel here in the United States called Pod Save America, and that was one of the inspirations for coming up with the phrase Pod Save Chocolate. And then, much to my surprise, it was available as a domain name, so I did it. Totally off track in terms of talking about this. So this particular product, some of the ingredients are actually made using precision fermentation. And one of those ingredients is barley, and barley contains gluten. And apparently the bars that are made with this particular recipe all contain gluten. So one of the things that you might want, and all three of the bars that I got were vegan. So if I'm looking at special dietary requirements, so if you're interested in a vegan chocolate alternative, alt chocolate, for which there is a lower environmental footprint, so fewer greenhouse gas emissions in its manufacturing, and if you're also looking for something where you can sidestep issues associated with illegal labor in the West African cocoa supply chain, then these bars are going to be interesting to you sort of on that intellectual level, and maybe to some extent an emotional level, because you have an emotional connection somehow to child slavery, or stopping child slavery, or not contributing to the economics of child slavery. A better way to think about it, because this bar does nothing to stop child slavery. That's not the mission of this bar, unlike Tony's Chocolate Lonely, which is one of their missions. So there is that. The thing that I would say about these bars, just sort of spoiler alert without going into too much detail, is that for a number of years, I was, fairly committed to sort of a raw vegan, right, diet. And one of the things that I observed as a part of that is that, people would make up a recipe for something that sort of resembled a real world alternative, but which would have been made from something that was cooked or was made from some sort of animal product or byproduct. And, there is a sense for which, when I am committed to this philosophy of this diet, that I am willing to make compromises when it comes to certain aspects of the eating experience. And I think that's what you have to do here with this current formulation, right? If you are really truly interested in eating high quality chocolate, right? And you taste the current formulations of the win-win bars. Um, that's not what you're going to get. These are made with oat milk, and so that should tell you a little bit about what some of the flavor profile is. Um, and there and the primary flavoring in this is going to be carob, and so the chocolate flavors in here are relatively muted compared with a robust chocolate. Now, there's no cocoa percentage because it's not chocolate, so there's no listing of how much fat is in this. It's just listed generically as vegetable fat. So I'm guessing this is compound. There's no cocoa butter in it, so there's no fat that needs to be tempered. They do say there's no palm oil in it. And so they're using some processed oil or fat, which will provide you with sort of the bite, chew, and melt, which are, by the way, for the most part, extremely good. The bite and the chew on these things are really, really pleasurable. The melt is not quite as clean as real cocoa butter is, right? Um, so yeah, right. Having said that, again, because they say it tastes and behaves and melts like chocolate, I took them at their word, and it was, very, very. Um, I took them to task because they said it tastes like chocolate. Not the kind of chocolate that I think that a lover of craft chocolate is going to want. But that said, in speaking with Johnny Drain this time last year, Johnny said that even at relatively small production volumes, it is possible to produce these bars less expensively than a traditional chocolate bar, right? And there are thousands of applications in the world of confectionery where, having a robust chocolate, right? Like a single origin, two ingredient chocolate is not the requirement. And where producing something which is cost competitive or less expensive than it's like a traditional perhaps compound would be completely acceptable. If you're doing a candy bar, and you want to have a very, very thin layer of chocolate enrobed around the candy bar, and this is more about the flavor and the ingredients that are in the center than the chocolate itself, then this is a perfectly acceptable alternative. The person who's going to be eating this is not going to be paying attention to the nuances of craft chocolate that many of us will. Chances are many of these things are also made with compound already, right? And so this is a perfect alternative to that, and it's vegan, right? And it's child labor free, and it is doesn't contribute as much to global warming. Fewer greenhouse gas emissions. I would like to really understand exactly, what that calculation looks like. But that is in fact the claim. So why is it disruptive, right? Is it going to be disruptive? And the answer is maybe, right? But again, maybe not in the way that Johnny Drain and the people at Win-Win think. Um, I take that back. I mean, I think it's going to be disruptive very, very much. They're not positioning this as a replacement for a high quality craft chocolate experience. They're positioning it specifically for, um, in my remembrance of the interview from a year ago. And I'm going to go send the preview for my review to Johnny and to other people at Win-Win and say, you know, technical, am I wrong anywhere technically here? Um, but my remembrance is that they understand that there's going to be a market for this, which is in that um, you know supermarket, drugstore, convenience store, bodega, gas station, um, chocolate candy world, and I believe that is in fact the case. So, is it you know you know is this bar better than a Tony's milk chocolate bar. It's very different, right? If you're a Tony's fan and you like the full milk profile of their chocolate, maybe you might like this. I'm not entirely certain. If you were a vegan, had some dietary issues that weren't associated with gluten, would you like this? Maybe. Um, right? Is it better than a Terry's orange bar? It's different, right? Is it better than the whole nut bar from Cadbury Dairy Milk? It's very, very different. I got to tell you that the Cadbury Dairy Milk whole nut bar was just weird. I mean, the flavor profile of that was just, oh my gosh, what it is that's going on in here. But at least on the Cadbury Dairy Milk whole nut bar, what they did is they listed what kind of fats they were using, right? And I think that's because they're calling it chocolate and they're by law required to list what the fats are. But because Win-Win is not calling it chocolate, they're not required by law to list what the fats are. And that's actually a contention that I have, right? They're not being as open as I think they could be and should be when they talk about what the ingredients are in their product. But again, if you're looking at sort of a casual something, it's going to be a small ingredient in something else that provides most of the flavor, and you just need to have a chocolate-like or chocolate adjacent product on it. You don't want to use compound. You'd like to use something that gets its cocoa ishness from something that's not from West Africa. Then I think that it's something to consider. So the disruption is going to be in mass market confectionery, not in premium chocolate, at least not with these current formulations. The other thing to think about is, should there be a wholesale decimation of the cocoa crop? So we go from 5 million metric tons to a million metric tons because of climate change. 99% of everything that anyone eats in the world is going to taste like this, right? And that chocolate is going to become um, something which is affordable only by the super rich. So something that's not a future I want to live in, right? But this is perhaps one way to think about a future in which cocoa becomes far less available due to deforestation, due to climate change. Something to consider with that. I want to remind everybody, just a quick reset before we get into the last 10 minutes or so of today's episode of Pod Save Chocolate, that you are watching Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay. I'm the creator of the series, the moderator. I'm also created thechocolatelife.com. This episode of Pod Save Chocolate, as are all episodes of Pod Save Chocolate, sponsored by members of thechocolatelife.com. So you can go over to the Chocolate Life. I'm logged in, so it says account here. What you can do is it will say join. So go join. And also, I believe what I've done is I put a subscribe link. I didn't put a subscribe link at the bottom of this page. Need to go do that. Anyway, I will do that. But you can support it. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the Pod Safe Chocolate channel on YouTube, put a comment in there, share it with friends. So help grow what it is that we're doing here. So in the last couple of minutes, I want to talk about things that I think will not be disruptive at all, but they're sort of fun to talk about. The first one of which is I got a little note in my feed from the Reykjavik grapevine that they are harvesting cacao in Iceland. Now, this is obviously grown in a greenhouse of one sort or another, but they asked the people at Omnom to convert this into chocolate. So there's this short quote from Kjartan about the experience, but I think it's a lovely bit of bright news. Iceland right now, I think it's the town of Grindavik, which is south of Reykjavik. There's an impending, just like huge volcanic eruption that they've been waiting for, which may actually devastate the Blue Lagoon, which would be devastating for the Iceland tourist industry. But there's now cocoa grown in Iceland, very, very small quantities, so it's not disruptive of anything, but it's a fun story. And I think we want to talk about fun stories. This is also a small part of a larger thing that we will talk about in a future episode, is that the governments of other countries, so one of which is Brazil, there may be some others, are looking to significantly expand production in their countries because of climate and issues related to the EU deforestation regulations and talking about not growing cocoa on deforested and protected lands. And so other countries are saying, we have a much better job, we have a much better chance of being able to address these issues. And so Brazil is looking to double production. But this is a fabulous case and just a fun article about, I wanted to use this. A cacao tree grows in Brooklyn, a cacao tree grows in Iceland. Just trying to make some sort of pop culture reference there. But this is really cool. Not disruptive at all, but a fun little story to think about. Another one that is not going to be disruptive, but this is something that has a story that has captivated the media over the course of the last week or so, which is the iconic English brand Hotel Chocolat. Was sold to Mars in the last week. I don't know exactly when the transaction will close, but there's been an agreement for Hotel Chocolat to sell the company to Mars. And the two founders, one of which is Angus Thirlwell, I've met Angus on a number of occasions over the last decade, walks away with about $140 million personally out of the deal, which is valued at about $550 million. So his co-founder also is going to walk away with $140 million. But this is not a sort of unicorn.com sort of windfall. Hotel Chocolat brand, not necessarily under that name, has been around for about 35 years. And so this represents the return on 35 years of investment in the brand. Now, is it disruptive? No, but it's indicative of a trend which is problematic, which has to do with concentration of power, market power. No, we now have one fewer independent brand in the world, right? And theoretically, what I need to do now is I need to add Hotel Chocolat to my wicked bad list because they're owned by Mars, and Mars is one of the companies that knowingly benefits from perpetuating illegal labor in the West African supply chain. So that's one of the criteria I have for being on my wicked bad list. And so Hotel Chocolat is now no longer is a brand that I have to throw on my wicked bad list for that reason. But there are some interesting signs. Number one of which is Angus at least says that he's going to stay on. Probably, I don't know if it's contractually, for 3 years or 5 years, but Angus at least is going to be staying on for to keep the company as the helm of the company for the next couple of years. It turns out they employ like 5,000, 6,000 people. I mean, it's a lot larger than I thought they were. And they're not going to try to take the brand global anytime too soon. So they want to shore up operations in the UK to expand within the UK, which is, I think, the right thing to do in the short term. The stock price had been downward trending for the last year or so. And I can tell you that looking at the listing on the LSE the day after this was announced, boom, the stock price went crazy. So that's interesting. But one thing that I will say about this, which is more problematic, and it's not disruptive, but it's why I think that we need to pay very, very careful attention about these kinds of announcements, is that they focus on the source of the cocoa being St. Lucia. Now, Hotel Chocolat is famous for having a hotel, right? St. Lucia, Boucan, and a restaurant. There is a farm that they own in St. Lucia, the Rabbit Estate, RABOT, the Rabbit Estate. But it turns out that only a very, very small percentage of all the cocoa that they use comes from St. Lucia. And people who don't know much about the cocoa and chocolate world don't make that connection. I was under the assumption that Ecam, this Italian company, had been making some or all of their chocolate. I was told by someone else recently that Barry Callebaut is making the chocolate. And so, Barry Callebaut making chocolate, I'm almost certain that Mars buys chocolate, right, from Barry Callebaut. I'm almost certain. I can't say, or it would make sense that they were doing that. So this is a real interesting story. It's not disruptive at all, but it is another understanding of why we need to pay very, very close attention to how the story is reported, and then also to think about what the concentration of power means when brands get consolidated under an Uber brand. Perhaps the best example of that, well, not the best example, but another example that we can think of that is when Green and Blacks sold to Cadbury, and then Cadbury got bought by Kraft, and then spun out into Mondelez. So Green and Blacks, I mean, I've met the founders, Craig Sam and his wife Joanne. I'm sorry, I don't remember her last name. And I was down at the cooperative in Belize back in 2007, 2010. Saw the work that was being done down there, but all of the reasons that caused Green and Blacks to come into existence have disappeared, right? They no longer are part of the DNA of the brand, even though the brand may rely, right, on that history. It's certainly gone. And this is why we need to be careful. It's not disruptive, but we need to be very, very aware of how concentration of market power, right? And what happens when big brands buy small brands, what that means to the entire industry. We relax and we lose some diversity. And I think that one of the ways that we save chocolate, right, is we need to promote diversity at all levels from the farm through the factory to the consumer. We just need to promote diversity at all levels. And one of the things which is really important about diversity when we think about this is resilience. Monocultures of ideas are just as bad as monocropping. If everything is done the same way, if everything's made by three companies, there's no resilience, right? And so if something happens, we don't have the ability, nature doesn't have the ability to respond. We as consumers don't have the ability to respond. So this is not disruptive, as I said, but it's an indicator of things we need to be aware of when it comes to promoting diversity and promoting resilience. And then finally, just a real quick thing, what is not going to be disruptive? And that's going to be blockchain. Now, this again is another list. This is a link to blockchain articles on DuckDuckGo. Not quite sure why it's taking so long to load this page. Sorry about that. I'm just going to put it down. But this is a link to blockchain resources from DuckDuckGo, which is a privacy-focused search engine. They do not track you the same way that Google does. So I want to say this, blockchain may be a part of a solution. It is not the solution. One of the reasons why is that a blockchain, which most people associated with cryptocurrency, the proof of work, which is responsible for actually making entries into the blockchain, is way too expensive for a system which is associated with just documenting the chain of custody, like who sold it, then who bought it, and then who did that person buy it, sold it to whom, and who did that person buy and sell it to whom, and if they traded futures contracts on the exchanges. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there that needs to be, and blockchain is not the tool for doing that for a bunch of reasons, right? Well, what happened, I'm sorry about that, everyone. What happened was I lost my internet connection. And so I went dark. So if somebody is in the comments, can they let me know if anybody's watching on YouTube? Because apparently I've lost LinkedIn and Facebook comments. Just let me know what's going on. So if you're on YouTube, somebody, I know Mike, it looks like you might be, and Chef Gardner, if you're, so I came back. Hopefully I can finish this. But what I wanted to do was just quickly talk very, very quickly about blockchain. and what that means for everyone. So there is going to be a blank screen, but it looks like there's some continuity here. Hopefully that will work. I will check it afterwards. Um, Anyway, so one of the things about blockchain, which is really, really important to understand, is that the focus is about verifying the integrity of the data that are entered into the chain, right? And they don't talk anything about the veracity, the truthfulness claims of the data that are entered into the blockchain, into the system. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think blockchain is disruptive in the world of cocoa and chocolate, because there are a different set of problems that need to be solved in order to be able to use blockchain effectively, that have nothing to do with the technology itself. Just say, you know, supply chain blockchain. This is like, blockchain. Just throwing blockchain at it is like trying to do a patent and say, here's something we do in the real world. Now do it on a computer. You can't patent that. Just throwing blockchain as an answer to it doesn't address that issue. What you might want to do is you might want to create a sophisticated computer system which can enable you to do the kind of veracity check and truthfulness checking, or incorporate that data into it, and then to be able to use the blockchain, right, and write out the log, so that what you can do is you can now go say, yes, I can verify that the changes that were made in the data in the system have not been altered, right, or changed or forged in some particular kind of way. And so, again, so blockchain is a part of a solution, but it is not the solution. It on its own is not disruptive, right, to anything that associated with it. It is the tools and technology which are built on top of it, which are really, really important to making blockchain potentially disruptive. And another reason why blockchain is not the solution, to the problem, is something that we find with every single system that is trying to provide a connection between the consumer and the farmer. So, if I have a QR code, right, and I can scan the QR code and it goes to a web page and I can learn about the farmer, that's great, right? So it provides some level of accessibility. Are we going to have independent verification that any of the information on that page is in fact truthful? That's another issue altogether. But the challenge with having, 100 different chain of custody systems where we're documenting the movement of some sort of commodity from the farm to the consumer. The problem with having a multiplicity of them, and then to have lots of different systems associated with these QR codes that are providing this information, right, is that there's no interoperability, right? There's no consistency in terms of how the data is connected, what data is collected, how it is stored, and how it is presented, right? And when we take a look at the fact that blockchain, um, a cryptocurrency blockchain is the wrong technology, for doing this because the proof of work is too expensive. That we look at the notion that blockchain doesn't talk about veracity; it talks about integrity. And first, we need to think about it, the blockchain will perfectly preserve bad data, the garbage in, garbage out, perfectly preserved. I could make a garbage in, garbage out blockchain just as easily as I could make one that had nothing but you know verifiable data in it. So that's issue. And then with this whole issue of interoperability, the system that Big Chocolate Company A and Big Chocolate Company B and Big Chocolate Company C, that they've independently developed, and maybe they all use blockchain, right? The fact that they're recording different data in different ways means that, and they have no economic incentive to make them interoperable, is a problem. So we actually can't compare apples to apples. And moving forward, when it comes to issues of diversity and resilience and how do we save chocolate, right? Blockchain is not disruptive for a lot of the reasons that I've mentioned, right? And hopefully, not everybody disappeared during the blackout, which was for some reason my Wi-Fi connection dropped. I'm going to need to figure out a way to hardwire my computer in going forward so that doesn't happen again. Um, But it's been, this is the hour. We run a little bit over. So I hope everybody found this episode of Pod Safe Chocolate interesting. Please, if you can, um, go to thechocolatelife.com. Click on join, become a member. And one of the benefits of becoming a member is you can become a part of the member discussion on every single page. So if you have some comment that you'd like to make and you don't think it makes sense in terms of the YouTube chat or LinkedIn or Facebook chat, you can start the discussion on the page. And every single post of Pod Safe Chocolate will have this set of links that you can go to. I will add to them because of things that we've mentioned over the course of the hour, but you will be able to ask me questions and start a discussion here on every single page. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much, everybody, for being with me today, or for being a part of this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. To all of my friends here in the United States, and for the people um, who participate. It's Thanksgiving in a couple of days, so today's Tuesday, Thanksgiving on Thursday. I will be joining my sister's family down in Phoenix for that. So I'm looking forward to having that. I will be doing an episode of Pod Save Chocolate on Friday, with the topic being giving thanks. Right, so talking about things we're thankful for in the world of chocolate. I'll be putting up a post on that maybe tonight, tomorrow. And so if you have comments that you'd like to make about how you are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving or giving thanks for chocolate over the course of the next couple of days. A quick sign off from Elmer Pineda of Yohoa Chocolate in Honduras. Elmer was here in the United States recently. He sent me some chocolate bars. I'm going to be doing a live interactive tasting and review from Elmer sometime in the near future when we get a chance to schedule that. So that's something to stay forward to. It's something that I want to incorporate many more of these online interactive tastings with makers over the course of Pod Safe Chocolate going forward. And with that, I want to say thank you very much again to everybody for being here, and to just think, right? What is it that you're going to do? What can you commit to um, today, next week, next month, over the course of the next year? What are you going to do to help Pod Save Chocolate? Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Well, not quite. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you on Friday.